Τώρα πρέπει να είμαστε live. Θέλω να σας πω ένα-δυο πράγματα σχετικά με το meeting. Καταρχήν, τα μικρόφωνα είναι κλειστά σε όλους και θα είναι κλειστά μέχρι που να ζητήσετε τον λόγο. Η προσπάθεια ήταν να κάνουμε μερικούς co-hosts, ώστε να μπορούν να δουλεύουν με τα μικρόφωνα τους. Από ό,τι φαίνεται, δεν μπορεί να γίνει με όλους. Και έτσι, όταν χρειαστεί είτε screen sharing, είτε κάτι άλλο, θα μεταφέρω το hosting στον άνθρωπο που θα κάνει το screen sharing και θα μου το διαπίσω όταν τελειώνει το screen sharing. Και τούτο αναφέρεται στον Neophytos Loizides και στον Charis Psaltis που θα κάνουν την παρουσία και χρειάζονται screen. Για τους υπόλοιπους θα τους ζητώ να ανοίγουν το μικρόφωνο τους και θα το ανοίγουν όταν τους το διώ εγώ. Για τη συζήτηση θα μιλήσουμε όταν έρθει η ώρα της συζήτησης. Νομίζω το άλλο που θέλω να πω είναι υπόψη τη συζήτηση θα την συντονίσουν η Soula Hadjikyriacou και η Andromachi Sophocleous, στους οποίους θα τους ζητήσω να ανοίξουν τα μικρόφωνα τους σε λίγο. Και, λοιπόν, η συζήτηση, ο συντονισμός της συζήτησης περνά από τώρα στη Soula Hadjikyriacou και την Andromachi Sophocleous. Το μικρόφωνο είναι δικό σας.
Θέμο, από ό,τι ξέρω, μιλώντας με τον Νίκο τον Μεσαρίτη, μου είπε να κάνω εγώ τον συντονισμό. Γιατί είναι δύσκολο όταν είμαστε δύο και δεν έχουμε επικοινωνία ανάμεσα μεταξύ μας. Δεν είμαστε σε μια ανοιχτή συζήτηση, δηλαδή. Και η Andromachi θα ήταν μέσα στους καλεσμένους να μιλήσει. Φυσικά, όποτε θέλει να επέμβει, να θέλει να παρέμβει και να μιλήσει και να πει κάτι.
Ωραία. Δεν υπάρχει κανένα πρόβλημα απολύτως. Θα προχωρήσουμε όπως το αναφέρεις εσύ.
Αντιλαμβάνομαι, η συζήτηση θα γίνει στα αγγλικά, έτσι. Γιατί έχουμε και τουρκοκύπριους φίλους.
I'm sorry about the language. I just got carried away. I got carried away and I shall repeat what I said in English. Tonight's event will be coordinated by Soula Hadjikyriacou, and she will have the floor soon. We have some problems about screen sharing. Charis Psaltis and Neophytos Loizides will need to share their screens. When they do that, I cannot give co-hosting rights, so I shall give them host rights, which means that when they finish sharing, they will have to pass back to me hosting. We don't expect this to be a big problem. Anybody else who wishes to speak can raise their hand electronically by going to participants and push the button raise hand so that I can see them. So that the coordinator can see them and give them the right to speak, and I shall unmute their microphones so that they will be able to speak. Okay, Soula.
So, good evening, everybody. I welcome you to this Zoom meeting. It's organized by Decision Peace, Απόφαση Ειρήνης. The title of our discussion is, Do Cypriots support a federal solution? No more lies. There is no time to lose, actually. So, what we are going to discuss actually are some very interesting findings by two academicians, Mr. Charis Psaltis and Mr. Neophytos Loizides, who made a survey about the Cyprus solution. And I will ask our friends to present the highlights of their findings to see how people behave if they have to vote for a solution. With us, the speakers, the guests we have, is Mr. Ioannis Kasoulides. You don't expect me to present Mr. Kasoulides, everybody know him. He's an ex-minister, he's an ex-spokesman, he's an ex-European MP. He's also Niyazi Kızılyürek. Of course, you don't expect me to present Niyazi Kızılyürek, everybody knows him. He's also an academician and the European MP right now. And Andromachi Sophocleous, I don't know if you know her, but if you don't, get to know her soon because she's a very promising political analyst.
Θέλω να κάνω ένα μικρό καλωσόρισμα εκ μέρους της Απόφασης Ειρήνης. Πριν να ξεκινήσουμε, θέλω να κάνω ένα μικρό καλωσόρισμα εκ μέρους της Απόφασης Ειρήνης πριν να ξεκινήσουν οι δυο.
Okay.
Ναι, Soula.
No. Yes. Is Nicos going to speak?
Nico?
Yes. I would like to thank the people who organized the research, very good friends, and also Mr. Kasoulides and Niyazi, who at the very last time, they stood up and make it possible for tonight. And Soula and this lady with the curly hair, which is very dynamic. And I mean Andromachi. But be sure that tonight is the beginning of a fight and of a Cyprus united. Tonight, Cyprus all over, from south to north, is united, if you see, from the participants. And it is united from Mediterranean to people of Cyprus in England and people from Cyprus to Brussels. So every Cypriot welcome to Federal Cyprus. Congratulations to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicos. So we go ahead with our discussion. First, I will ask Mr. Charis Psaltis, who is Associate Professor of Social and Developmental Psychology at the University of Cyprus, and Mr. Neophytos Loizides, Professor of International Conflict Analysis at the University of Kent, to present us their research. Please go ahead. Give us the highlights of the survey. Charis.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Themo. I'm just trying to make sure that I can share my screen.
I shall transfer you hosting right now so that you can do that.
Okay.
Okay, you should be able to do that now. No, I'm sorry. I transferred hosting rights to somebody else. Jihan Tizaroglu, can you transfer hosting back to me?
Yes, let me try. This is the first time I'm trying this, and I don't know.
Just go on the participants list on the.
Yes.
Okay. If you go right there, you will have.
I just give the right to Professor Psaltis.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
that's right.
Okay.
Good.
Come on, Charis.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for organizing this. Thank you for the invitation. I hope we can have a very fruitful discussion of these research findings. Tonight, we will be presenting a piece of research that was conducted with a multidisciplinary team of academics from different universities. And I have here with me my colleague from the University of Kent, Professor Neophytos Loizides. So we will be presenting to you some of the findings today. The presentation will be split in two parts. The first part is more general questions about what the two communities in Cyprus today are ready to accept or reject, or could tolerate if necessary. And this is a presentation of findings not only of the recent research that was completed in March 2020, but also some trends showing the trends in the last decade, which is also very important. And the second part of the presentation tonight is what Neophytos will be presenting, which is this new methodology called the conjoint analysis, which allows for the identification of packages with very specific details included in the package, defined as the content of the solution, and estimations of what percentage of the voters would be ready to accept such a package in each community. So I'm starting with a few words about the methodology of the research. This was a research that was done with a stratified random sampling, around 800 voters in each community. And the data collection was completed between November 2019 and March 2020. So here we start with the presentation of the stance on BBF, bizonal bicommunal federation. With blue color is the Greek Cypriot community, with orange is the Turkish Cypriot community. What we have here is, as you see, 1/4 of Greek Cypriots finds the bizonal bicommunal federation entirely unacceptable, and about 28% of Turkish Cypriots finds BBF unacceptable. Then we have 37% of Greek Cypriots who find it tolerable if necessary, and 17% of Turkish Cypriots. And then we have another 1/3 of Greek Cypriots that finds this solution satisfactory, and 1/4 of Turkish Cypriots. And in the end, here on the right, you can see that we have 6% of Greek Cypriots who find it highly desirable, and 1/3 of Turkish Cypriots who find it highly desirable. So I would, summarizing this slide here, I would say that only 1/4 in each community rejects BBF, and then there is the vast majority that would either accept it because they find it acceptable or ideal, or because they consider it as necessary, and they would vote it as the second best solution, if you like. It's also interesting to have a look at the trends here from different research that was conducted in the last decade. What you see here is that after the Crans-Montana failure in 2018, we have an upward trend of people, voters in the Greek Cypriot community who find BBF satisfactory solution. And correspondingly, we have a big decrease of people who are against BBF. Actually, the percentage is almost cut in half since the Crans-Montana failure. There is, I think, a very good explanation for that. to which I will come later. But let's see also the picture in the Turkish Cypriot community. So here are the trends for the Turkish Cypriot community. In the Turkish Cypriot community, we see that there is a majority in 2018 and 2020, more than 50% of Turkish Cypriots have a very clear view of supporting BBF. This is the light green color that you can see here. And it's very interesting to see that only in the last couple of years, we have a big difference compared to 2010. So I would say that in the last few years, there has been a consolidation of a federalist mentality in the Turkish Cypriot community. Now we move on to the question of what is the stance of people, voters, on the continuation of the current situation, the status quo. And here there is an interesting difference between the two communities, because as you can see, the vast majority of Greek Cypriots, close to 80%, state that they find the current situation entirely unacceptable. Whereas for the Turkish Cypriot community, only 20% finds it totally unacceptable. So that means that the rest of the percentage, around 80%, would either tolerate or find it acceptable. Here is also the trend in the last decade. This first for the Greek Cypriot community. So what we see here, and the most impressive finding, I would say, is the shift, the radical shift of people who reject, who are against the current situation. We had a huge increase from 2019 to 2020, almost 30% increase of people who reject the current situation. I think this is because of the current developments in the Eastern Mediterranean and the sense that the Greek Cypriot community is losing a lot of its assets, if you like, or bargaining chips. For example, we have developments of Turkey drilling wherever they like. There is no major reaction by the international community. We have developments in Varosha, the possibility of internally displaced people from Varosha losing their properties, something they always considered that would be part of a solution. So these are only two elements of a situation that I think most Greek Cypriots would find unacceptable. And I think that explains the situation to a great extent. Then we go to Turkish Cypriots. Here the situation is different because we see that is in the last few years there is an increasing trend of people who would find the status quo acceptable. So this might be something we need to discuss later on with our Turkish Cypriot colleagues, whether the developments and how they are interpreted in their own community. Now we have another slide here, which is the question: consider a hypothetical scenario where the negotiations between the two communities conclude, a solution plan is drafted, and a referendum is organized. In such a future referendum, and if you had the right to vote, how do you see yourself voting? So here one can see the various options. I prefer not to say. 1/4 of Greek Cypriots did not state their preference, and about 10% of Turkish Cypriots. But then we have a very interesting finding here, because you see the people who tend to vote yes, or are certain to vote yes, that they actually form the majority in the Greek Cypriot community. So adding 30% to 21% is just over 50%. And the people who say, I lean towards a no vote, but I might sway towards a yes vote, or I would certainly or almost certainly vote no, these two percentages add up to 1/4 of the population. So if you like, the clear message here is that the people who lean towards a yes outnumber the people who lean towards a vote by 2 to 1. So I think this is very important politically speaking. In the Turkish Cypriot community, we have a more even distribution, with the exception of the last one, where we have about 40% that state that they are sure to vote no. We had another question that had to do with comparing what people voted back in 2004 during the Annan Plan referendum compared to what they tend to vote today if they had the chance to go to a new referendum. And this was also a very interesting cross-tabulation to do, because we found that most of the people who voted yes would again vote yes in the Greek Cypriot community, whereas most of the people who voted no would now vote yes. So there is a clear change of view in favor of a solution within the last decade. In the Turkish Cypriot community, we have the people who voted yes, 1/3 voting yes again, and some of those, about 1/5, shifting to a no vote. Now, these are the people who voted no back in 2004. Again, we have people who don't want to state their view in the Greek Cypriot community, who are about 1/4, but then again, you see that the majority of those who voted no in the Greek Cypriot community have now shifted here towards voting yes. This is what I mentioned earlier. Whereas in the Turkish Cypriot community, the majority of those who voted no are going to vote no again. Now we move on to the second part, which I think is much more interesting, because it's the new methodology of the conjoint analysis that Neophytos will introduce and explain more, which allows the identification of specific elements within a piece package. And as I said earlier, it allows to identify piece packages that could be accepted in a referendum in both communities. Neophyte? Should I, maybe you should just
unmute him and transfer him host rights if he wants to share a screen.
Okay, I can shift the slides if you like, Neophyte.
I can do it, might be easier.
Yeah.
We can release you from.
Okay. So let me shift hosting, right? Okay.
I don't seem to be able. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this meeting. As Charis mentioned, there are some very important findings that we're all very excited to be sharing with you. As Charis is one of the critiques, if you wish, of the existing work and the gap we're trying to resolve here is that we often present findings about federation, support for federalism, but then the question becomes what is the exact context of these federal solutions that we're asking participants. Are participants exposed to the same understanding of federal arrangements? Can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
I can. So the key question here is that are people who are being exposed to this question, respondents, responding to the same understanding of federalism? Are people having the same knowledge on federalism, or do they mean two different federal solutions with the right content for their own communities? What kind of yes do people say when they ask the question, do you support a federal solution? Is it some federal solution that both sides have similar understandings of, or is it a federal solution that their own leaders understand in their own domestic national community discourse? So this is the major gap, and this is where this survey, the conjoint analysis, gives us an opportunity to test shared understandings. And we're very fortunate here because the Guterres package came up with a set of issues that need to be resolved, some of which we included in the survey with regard to power sharing, with regards to security, with regards to compensations. We also added other elements as well. We thought that was extremely important for the two community. So the attempt here is, could these two packages that communities think as potentially tolerable create a settlement that can win simultaneous majorities on both sides? Soula very nicely asked us from the beginning to give a synopsis of the findings. So the first thing that I would like to report, and which is quite promising, is that we identify packages indeed that both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots can agree. And this went to a lot of detail as to the specific arrangements. So the critique that Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots might agree on the broader label, that is of federalism, but when it comes to the details, there are key differences that prevent the two sides, their public opinions, from reaching a settlement. That critique, in our humble view and our findings, does not hold anymore. A second important finding that connects to what Charis has said before is that there has been a movement of public opinion. Charis and I have worked on different surveys with other colleagues a few years back, and what we have noticed in a paper that we published with Ishik Kuchuk and with Hussein Chakal is that part of this movement is driven by IDPs, refugees, and particularly in the Greek Cypriot community, who realize after a long stalemate that they have more interest in supporting a future settlement than supporting the status quo. So there is a qualitative change in the Greek Cypriot public opinion in favor of federalism. This is partly attributed to IDPs and refugees, something we couldn't see in the first surveys that were done immediately after the Annan plan in the data, for instance, that others have collected, specifically Alexandros Lordos and his team. So the third important change and very important finding is that Greek and Turkish Cypriot profile in favor of the settlement is also becoming more international. So the two sides seem to be agreeing on arrangements that have higher involvement of the international community. And this is a very important, again, take-home lesson for international mediators involved in the Cyprus question, that there is a number of arrangements that they need to think and convince themselves and their patron states, their external mediators, to adopt in order for the two sides in Cyprus to engage on a settlement. So in the summary, yes, we have packages, yes, they involve the international community, and yes, there is support from both, potential support from both communities. So when it comes to the specific work questions we have done, what is important is not necessarily the packages themselves, with multiple ways of resolving the Cyprus question for those of you who are involved in mediation. So just a summary of what could be done. And we have shown it in the level of, in the macro level, when it comes to the more details, there's a lot of work that can be done and even more improvements that are convinced further undecided communities and individuals to support the settlement. So as you might recall, a lot of attention in the past have been put on the federal executive. We have 5 different options with presidential, parliamentary system. We provided more detail to the respondents. So what you see there is only what has been in the main screen, but there was a lot of more information as to having a Greek Cypriot president, Turkish Cypriot vice president, having co-presidents, having the veto being included with the support of MPs from each community, and so on. And then there was a question of territory, the return of the 50 villages, as in the Annan plan, Varosha. But then what is going to happen with regards to Morphu? Should it stay under Turkish Cypriot administration? Should it be returned on the Greek Cypriots? This is how we presented them in the Greek Cypriots. There was a Turkish Cypriot in Turkish questionnaire, obviously, asking the questions from the Turkish Cypriot point of view. There we propose also two different arrangements. One that was discussed in Mont Pelerin, with Morphu and North Carpathia becoming federal areas, and the other idea of old Morphu being returned to the Greek Cypriots and building a new city next to it for the Turkish Cypriots. So two potential compromises there. On the properties, most the arrangement there was you either get your property, the property that you had or you hold if you're Turkish Cypriots, but if you're negatively affected, there will be a set of compensations starting from 50,000 euros, going to 150, then 200, then 300, and then 300 plus guarantee housing anywhere in Cyprus. So we created this set of compensations that we hope will change the level of support on both communities, because we're given to individuals on both communities, and move support further in favor of the settlement. You're all aware that the Guterres package had an implementation monitoring mechanism in exchange for the guarantees. We kept also that as an option. So UN with the former guarantors, Greece, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, UN with a third party such as NATO, UN with EU countries, and then we named 3 EU countries that we thought could be potential contributors to the peacekeeping, and then third countries, important third countries that have been, some of them who have been historically involved on the Cyprus questions, and others that could be invited from outside the EU, Japan, Australia, and Canada. And then finally, we look at a conflict resolution mechanism. The Supreme Court will be the final arbiter in most political systems. It is the case in political systems, complex political systems, such as the one that we're proposing for Cyprus. The Supreme Court will have the final arbitration on issues of human rights, but more importantly on deadlocks when the two communities cannot agree. And there we look at a range of arrangements from having Greek and Turkish Cypriots as rotating chairs, to have minority judges from the European Court of Human Rights. Remember, this is part of the Annan plan. A majority of judges appointed by the European Court of Human Rights, a more international solution. And finally, a recent innovative idea proposed by various established politicians such as Ioannis Kasoulides, on having an international tribunal in Cyprus, UN tribunal with headquarters in Cyprus, and then reinforcing that tribunal with various authorities, in our view, proposing the judges for the Supreme Court. So from more local solutions to more international options in terms of arbitration. You might recall that in the Annan plan, that was a problematic provision. What we find here is quite the reverse, which very much signifies not only the qualitative change in public opinion in favor of a potential compromise, but also the type of settlements that are being favored by Greek and Turkish Cypriots becoming of more international, if you wish, nature. So this is how the screen appears for the participants. You have on the left side the different dimensions: power sharing, territory, properties, implementation mechanisms, Supreme Court, and then you get a choice 1 and choice 2. And what the software, this is a very developed method, not something that we develop. It's a very established method in the social sciences. Some of the top work in the social sciences uses this method. You get your choice 1 and you get a choice 2. And then respondents are looking, they're either supporting 1 or 2, and they say whether they're going to vote for it in a referendum. The way the data being analyzed is an algorithm that allow us to identify specific packages, but also what impact each concession makes. One of the major critiques for the existing work we have done so far is that, yes, people support federalism, but how do we get to move sides to support the different types of federal arrangement? Why would Greek Cypriots make concessions, or why do Turkish Cypriots make concessions? What do we need to give to the Greek Cypriots to say yes, and what do we need to secure to the Turkish Cypriots to say yes? This is what the exact method, what is exactly this method trying to do, to identify areas of priority in conjunction with other elements of the peace process. So a very simple way here for the participants to tell us what do they think when they compare different settlements, and then the algorithm, the data analysis that is being done by us, identifies the key priorities for each of the two communities. So this is the data analysis. It sounds a little bit complicated here, but to give you the hints as to how to read this table, the black dots are Greek Cypriots, the orange dots are Turkish Cypriots. The orange line in the middle is the baseline based on the arrangements that were more or less endorsed by the UN in their plan in 2004. Anything to the right is increased for the peace settlement. Anything to the left means that the two sides, any of the two sides, sees that arrangement as negative. The most interesting part is right in the middle when we talk about compensations, because both sides will get some kind of compensation for their property. You can see how level of support increases on both communities simultaneously when you have more compensations. So the more compensations we have, the more likely for both communities to support the settlement. And that the highest levels of compensation means something like 12% increase for the Greek Cypriots overall, compared to the lowest compensations. And for the Turkish Cypriots, it increases their level of support by 8%. So we're talking about a very, very important factor if we identify sources, obviously, to support these higher levels of compensations, either through the sale of existing property or foreign donors or exploitation of Cyprus's natural reserves. Well, this is the first finding about compensation. So we have here a map, if you wish, of how we can influence public opinion. The data further up on the scale about territory are also very important. It demonstrates the primacy of Morphu, and it's almost a mirror image with the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots losing, if they lose Morphu. About 11% on each community is lost if Morphu goes to the other side. That's why Morphu ended up being such a difficult issue. But here, there are a number of arrangements. If Morphu and other territories are added to the federal administration, that could potentially create a compromise. Or if Morphu is given to the Greek Cypriots, the old town, and there's a new town built next to it, that can also, as I will show in the simulations, be a source of potential compromise. Interestingly, further up, one could see that power sharing, the different elements of power sharing, which was so controversial in the last round of negotiations, did not do much in terms of relative change in public opinion, did not have major influence in terms of public opinion. You could see that the dots are very close to the orange line, not contributing too much in the change in public opinion, which is a source of optimism that the sides could be more willing in the future to accommodate each other. Going further down, when it comes to security, again, there we see, like in the case of territory, that there is a mirror image with some of the potentially compromising solutions, having, let's say, EU countries supporting the UN in terms of guarantees. Greek Cypriots are obviously in favor. You can see the black dot further on the right. But Turkish Cypriots are very hesitant of that. Likewise, when it comes to having third countries such as Japan, Australia, and Canada, again, you can see a difference, although not as noticeable as compared to having EU countries. What seems to be very interesting, and this could be, I will imagine that will be a controversial issue in the discussion, is that the two sides seem to be very close when it comes, closer compared to the other dimensions and other values, when it comes to NATO as being a potential party involved in the mediation here. So that, I will imagine, will be a source of a very interesting discussion later on. And then finally, when it comes to arbiters, international headquarters, obviously UN headquarters in Cyprus, something that would push the settlement, push support. You can see again the dots on the right of the line, contribution to the settlement and support from both communities. Let me summarize those findings in packages very quickly. So we have here the Annan Plan, which was our baseline, and then you have New Deal 1, New Deal 2, New Deal 3, right? And then if I have to summarize, something like the Annan Plan that had MORPHO in it, we had a parliamentary system with some support from both communities on the making of the decision. The Annan Plan had a quarter, a little bit more on more important decisions from the both houses. Some compensations, we estimated about 50,000. This is our own estimation. Keeping Greek and Turkish guarantees, Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot judges, with some judges from the European Court of Human Rights. Overall support around 39%, Greek Cypriots 33%, Turkish Cypriots a little bit more, but not making the majority. Interestingly, this 39%, we can see that in Deal 1, in Deal 2, and Deal 3 can become 45, 59, and 56. So here, with some changes in the institutional arrangements, we can see that the level of support could go up. New Deal 1 looks more or less like a little bit like the Guterres package, one could say, but not exactly the same. Greek and Turkish Cypriots co-presidents, MORPHO returned to the Greek Cypriot, 150,000 euros, EU countries being involved. We get almost close to a majority, but still in the mid-40s. And the more interesting plans are Plan 2 and 3. Plan 2, New Deal 2, includes all parties included in the power sharing in accordance to the seats in the assembly. A more parliamentary system, so does Deal 3. MORPHO and North Carpathia to become federal areas. The other option, obviously, is all part of MORPHO, Rizzocarpasso and Ialusa to be returned to the Greek Cypriots. Full compensations of 300,000 euros plus guarantee housing anywhere in Cyprus. For anyone who has been displaced in 1974. What is the difference between, the major difference between Deal 2 and Deal 3 is that Deal 2 has international countries outside the EU supporting the UN, while deal 3 has NATO being the most important actor in the security implementation mechanism. Deal 2 gets 59% support, 65% by the Greek Cypriots, 53% by the Turkish Cypriots, while deal 3 is a little bit lower, 56%, but the two sides are closer, 58% for the Greek Cypriots and 55% for the Turkish Cypriots. So to sum up, these deals are very important in terms of giving us some baseline of what public opinion could support today, or could have supported, to be more precise, 8 months ago when we ran the survey. The package themselves are very important, but obviously they are not the end of the story. These are key parameters that one could consider, but they could be obviously better ones once we engage in more detailed negotiations. What is important is that once we move into details, and I think this is more important than the packages themselves, Greek and Turkish Cypriots could agree even in the details of the settlement, not just on the key parameters, not just on the key labels of federal Cyprus, but on the specific parameters as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Loizides. Thank you, everybody, listening to Mr. Loizides. Can we have the participants? So let's hear the first comments on this hard work that our two friends carried out. Mr. Kasoulides.
Excuse me,
Yes.
can I have hosting rights back, Neophytos?
If I can, hosting rights back. How do I do that?
If you go on the on my name and you go up to the on my screen, on my face, as you see it, you go on top of it and on the right.
Yes, I did it. I did it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Soula.
Okay, let's go and have your reaction to it. Mr. Kasoulides, can we have your comments about the survey? We don't hear, Mr. Kasoulides. You have to put
You have
on
to unmute
your microphone on top. This is technology. It's mute. Mr. Kasoulides.
still muted.
Okay, shall we go on
Okay,
with somebody else? Okay,
Okay.
Mr. Kasoulides, please start from the beginning. We haven't heard anything.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, the reason I couldn't intervene is because the host kept me on mute.
Yes. Now you have a voice.
It's very interesting study. Good evening, everybody. Very interesting study. I will take from this research as a first conclusion, a very important conclusion, is the fact that a lot of people gradually accept that the stay as we are, the status quo, people are realizing that it is not an option. First of all, because the status quo is not static. Secondly, because the status quo is deteriorating. And I would say that it's deteriorating to the detriment of both communities for different reasons. For the Greek Cypriot community, who voted in majority against the Annan plan, understand now that the argument, we will vote for it, but the cushion of our safety is to remain as we are. It's proving now that it is no longer an option. things are deteriorating. Let me mention a few examples. The issue of the exclusive economic zone and the offshore natural gas reserves, the issue of Famagusta and Varosha, and most probably the issue of physical security for reasons that do not have to do with Cyprus, but also with the Aegean and the dispute between Greece and Turkey. This is for the Greek Cypriot community. But for the Turkish Cypriot community, with all due respect, because I cannot speak on behalf of the others, but it is very important to realize that while the struggle of the Turkish Cypriot community all over the years was to convince everybody that it should not be dominated by the Greek Cypriot community, and quite rightly so, and perhaps this, they want it, everybody accepts now the principle of political equality. On the other hand, the fact that it will not be dominated by the Greek Cypriot community should not mean that somebody else should dominate the Turkish Cypriot community, and in this case, Turkey, but it is the time that the Turkish Cypriot community should be emancipated and decide about its destiny or co-design with the other Cypriot inhabitants of this island, be it Greek Cypriots or anybody else. So the first point is this. The second, which is my motto always, is that I am now in the 70s as an age. For 46 years, that is for the whole of my life, I live with this present situation. And my worry when I leave this world would be only if my generation and other younger than me generations that are living today are bequeathing to their children the same fate and the same security dangers that we have lived through. So I think, first of all, that the key to the solution of the Cyprus problem should be the security issue. The implementation, security of implementation, yes, but there is also the physical security in order not to contemplate in any way that things of 1963 or 1974 will happen again. And once we achieve a security settlement by which both communities can feel equally secure, and not a solution, let's say, like the status quo of the present guarantees, which make the Turkish Cypriots 100% secure, but the Greek Cypriots 100% unsecure. Therefore, we need something that will make both feel equally secure. Otherwise, and my last third point, is very commendable, the exercise presented by Professor Neophytos Loizides with some simulations. But I believe that if the two communities, through their leaders, reach a settlement, whichever the combination of the ideas projected here today, it is a sense of responsibility of the Cypriots to decide whether they will accept what the leaders have agreed or reject. I remind you that in the referendum for the Annan Plan, there was no agreement by the leaders. The leaders did not undertake to present something to the people and ask them to support it. That's why the leaders are voted for. It's not a cherry picking thing, going into a supermarket and choosing this, that, and the other. Or that because we don't like one item of what it would be agreed, it is our responsibility to reject the solution. If we have an adequate arrangement regarding the security that makes both sides feeling equally secure, then I think we must think 3 times and 4 times before deciding that a solution that has been agreed by the 2 leaders should be rejected. That's my position. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kasoulides. It's true that this survey is on the level of people. It is important to know how the leadership, the level of leadership, how the leadership reacts. Because if we don't have a leadership that believes in the federal solution, that works for it, that is confident it's going to work, we have done nothing, actually. If you see your president crying, even those who are positive towards a solution, federal solution, they start wondering what's happening. I mean, you must have somebody really believing in this solution and trying his best to achieve it. You said something about that the political equality has been accepted. Are you sure that Mr. Anastasiadis has accepted political equality? Because a number of times he mentioned that he will take away the yes vote from the Council of Ministers and things like that. Do you think he really believes in that?
Well, my dear Soula, first of all, here we are discussing addressing the people.
The survey.
Not the leaders. We are addressing.
Yes, but we have to compare with the
one problem in Cyprus is the question of how confident the leaders are when they are negotiating among themselves that whatever they produce will be accepted by the people. I think that in this survey, in the opinion polls presented initially by Professor Psaltis, the people now is getting around to send the correct signals to the leaders. You're asking me about President Anastasiadis. I beg you to ask him about these things. Not me.
Okay. All right. Anyway, let's go to Niyazi Kızılyürek now and see how he reacts to this survey, how he sees this survey. Mr. Kızılyürek?
Well, I yield my... Do I have to do something?
No, the coordinator will unmute his microphone, I believe.
Okay. I have to mute it.
Hello. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do. But we don't see you.
So, Mr. Kasoulides unmuted me finally, yeah? So, hello to everyone from. It's really an interesting debate and very, very interesting numbers, actually, and positionings. I would say, actually, what my both colleagues, Charis and Neophytos, presented to us, really, it's like a miracle. It's a miracle in a sense because we are a country which is searching for a federal state without federalists, basically, without federalist movements. Despite of this, civil society seems that understands more the necessity for a federal settlement than our political elites. Because don't ignore the fact that all UN Secretary Generals are demonstrating and underlining how the political elites failed in informing the citizens for political settlement and federal state in Cyprus. We don't have any information. We don't have political elites working hard for it. We have some, of course, but overall, starting by media to political elites in general in elites, we see a kind of distance to the whole idea. And of course, many misinformations, but despite of this, Cypriot citizens, Greek and Turkish Cypriots, somehow we understand that a federal state is possible. There are different options to solve different matters of federalism, starting by executive, going to territory, etc. Actually, that is very promising as I see it in first look. On the other hand, we have to underline that, which is also somehow it comes out, that the communities, they have different Cyprus problems, and they want to solve the Cyprus problem in their own way. What I'm saying, there is no one Cyprus problem. There are many Cyprus problems, at least two, which two communities are tackling with. When it comes to Greek Cypriots, definitely we are talking about to stop the invasion, to get rid of Turkish army, to have a right to return to a property and territory. And when it comes to the Turkish Cypriots, I think the main thing is the international recognition, which is missing. Now, that's why we will always see some difference, emphasis from the communities when it comes to solution and how we interpret the solution. Now, the second thing is, I think there is an understanding among the communities that certain things in Cyprus are impossible, and they are impossible because our history made it very clear to us. So, and that actually is a foundation, a historical foundation of a federal state. So what told us our history, what is not possible in Cyprus? Our history told us that a majority rule based on a unitary state definitely is not possible. That was something for this, for example, President Makarios fought in the 1960s to have a majority rule with a Turkish minority, and that didn't happen. Now, second thing which didn't happen is the tendency of separation of the Turkish Cypriot elites, which were fighting for this since middle of 1950s. Now, we also end up to understand that there is no way for a legitimate separate Turkish Cypriot state. Now, if we exclude separation on the one hand and domination on the other hand, in other words, majority rule or separation, if these are excluded, definitely we are in the realm of a federal state. We are in the realm of federalism. And I think people understand very well what is possible and what is not possible. However, that is a historical lesson which has been not endorsed among the political elites. There are still those who are rejecting the political equality. There are still those who are seeking for a separate Turkish Cypriot state. There are those who are dreaming of a two separate state and confederalism. But that is rather at the level of political elites. Now, what we had here tonight, some results, how the citizens are responding to the different issues of federal settlement in Cyprus, definitely we can say that we have something promising in front of us. We have something promising without any contribution of political elites or preparation by political elites. It means that if a little bit work, definitely this number and tendencies can get much better. That's my first statement to be discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kızılyürek. It's true that if we reach that stage to have a referendum, we must have a pan-Cyprian campaign for the solution. Otherwise, until now, people don't really know what is a federation. Okay, some parties like AKEL or actually the only party who is doing some seminars and so on, some NGOs, some university groups are doing some work on it. But generally speaking, most people don't really know how federation works. And we have to inform people. And this is a work of the government, actually. I'm also surprised that we see this rise of for supporting federation. Okay, our friends told us some reasons why there is this rise, but there are some other factors like who haven't changed, like the church, for example, the schools. They are still very reactionary. The nationalists are still there. The general atmosphere is still very negative. But it seems that the people are getting bored with the situation. They start realizing where it's leading to, and so they want a real change. Andromachi, can you also comment on these results?
Yes, I first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and at the same time, I would like to say that the results are very important in giving us a more sort of scientific grasp as to what the situation is on the ground. I am of the opinion that in general, and all of us here, I suppose, we have been discussing the Cyprus problem for so long, and just like Mr. Kasoulides said, he has spent his life discussing it and being immersed in this problem, that I'm often concerned that we become too comfortable discussing the issue and of what happens on the ground. I actually believe that today we are at this paradoxical level in which the Cyprus problem influences every single aspect of our lives, be it from environmental issues to city planning to the country's geopolitical endeavors. But at the same time, because we are so used to this problem existing, and because we are so used to actually living with this problem in existence, we do not grasp the extent to which the problem actually influences our lives. And there is this sense of pseudo-comfortable state in this pseudo-stable status quo that we live in, that does not allow the majority of Cypriots to actually become decisive and take a stance on the issue. The results by the two academics are very promising, but the question is whether these results can be translated into concrete action and into concrete desire for a solution. And this is where I believe that the political leaders and the responsibility of the political leaders comes in. Because you need the political leaders and the political elites, as Niyazi, Mr. Kızılyürek said, you need them to come to the forefront, having realized the gravity of the situation, being strengthened with results like the ones by Charis Psaltis and Neophytos Loizides that show that there is a fertile ground for discussing a federation and putting forward the vision for a federation. As you said, Soula, not many people actually know what a federation is. Not many people actually know what we are talking about when it comes to solving the Cyprus problem. And I am increasingly concerned that the longer we spend having the Cyprus problem solution in the realm of the imaginative, and the longer we discuss it either through empty rhetoric or through empty slogans, the more we risk actually being faced with the solution that time brings and that time imposes upon us, be it on the issue of Varosha that Mr. Kasoulides mentioned, be it on the issue of us losing touch with the northern part of our island, like we are now at this stage in which we are so dependent upon the elections in the north that we really are at this crucial state in which we depend on having a pro-federation candidate being elected. Otherwise, everything we discuss will basically be up in the air. So you see that this is really the time, on the one hand, for political leaders to use such academic research and come forward and act decisively when it comes to federation. But at the same time, we need the people who are pro-federation, the people who have a federation, who are federalists in spirit and in conscience, to come forward and to be more strengthened when it comes to uttering this desire and to uttering the possibility for such a future, and to be able to create the vision for a federal Cyprus, because what we are missing and what we are lacking in at this stage is that vision. And sadly, I am not convinced that the political leaders, especially in the Republic of Cyprus, in the areas controlled by the Republic of Cyprus, I am not convinced that they are willing to work for this. For instance, the Democratic Rally, it has been more than 2 years that they said that they would do seminars on a federation, and they said that they would put forward the vision for a federation, and we have seen nothing. On the contrary, every time an electoral process comes, we see all the problems and all the problematic rhetoric that led us to where we are today resurfacing instead of setting it aside, just like we saw, for instance, in the European Parliament elections. So I really believe that these results that we saw here today are very positive, but we need to find a way to translate these results into concrete actions at many levels, be it at the political leadership level, on the ground when it comes from people and from civil society. So we still have a lot of work to do. Of course, as Niyazi said, there is the fertile ground here, but I think we should use the results presented to us today as a stimuli and as an incentive for us to work stronger, rather than as something that would allow us to sit back and relax and say, okay, the people are ready. No, we need concrete action for them to be ready for a federal Cyprus. Yeah.
Thank you, Andromachi. We must stress one fact for this survey, actually, as I understand it. When people vote for or agree for a federal solution, this is their second choice. Their first choice for Greek Cypriots is unitary state. The ideal solution is the unitary state, although it was never an option in the last years. And for the Turkish Cypriots is the two-state solution, the ideal one. Of course, they know that these are not possible, so they get to accept a feasible solution, which is the federal solution. We have been talking about it since 1977. So I want to know if anybody else wants to comment on these results of this survey. Anybody from the people who are with us tonight, if they have any questions or if they want to comment on anything, we can hear them. Anybody?
If you can raise your hand electronically, is the only way to see you and give you the opportunity to speak.
Something I would also like to stress before we get to our first question is that I think personally it's wrong to talk about a compromise solution, especially painful compromise solution. If you mention the word compromise, this includes the meaning of a defeat, and people would never like it. It's like the 1960 when the nationalists wanted union and they got independence, and they never believe in that. So now we have to say that we have reached this stage. This is the only possible solution. This is the only option we have, and we have to go for it and work to implement it and have no hard feelings. This is my own personal view, of course. So anybody wants to comment?
Nicos Mesaritis wants to comment.
Yes, Nicos.
Just to help the participants and give them courage. I don't want to take advantage. I like what Soula said. Compromise is a very bad word. People does not like to compromise. People like to struggle, to fight, to participate in an effort for the better. So we present the better and we call them to participate. In Cyprus, there were many mistakes from the leadership, from the very beginning. I can say before the very beginning. I am not going to say the names. Some years before, I was trying to explain the mistakes. I don't care now. I don't think the young people, they could understand anything by hearing the mistakes. We have to organize a new country, and don't try to find logic. Don't try to learn academic rules. Try to feel your heart. That's what people understand. That's why after the checkpoints were opened, many relations between people, they didn't know each other. Many people that they were educated to hate each other, they created brotherhood relations. They didn't even do it through logic. They did it through their hearts. They did it because they felt that this is the way to live in this place. I know by being romantic, you cannot solve problems, but being romantic and use your brain is the mixture. Last night, 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, I was gathering some songs to present it, and Themos said we cannot do it with the technology. And I tried to, with Charis, to maybe he knew the way, and he said, we don't need songs. I can tell you that democracy in Greece after Genta stood because of music. And the songs were 4. One was from John Lennon, all we are saying, just give peace a chance, a very simple song. But it was like a river coming from the mountain, taking everything down. The other was a song from Theodorakis, sung by son of justice, please don't forget my country. The other was of group Iorum. First, I choose Bella Ciao, and I said, all these people, they are going to say these are communists, and I took it out, and I choose a very traditional, very romantic song, which if you took out the lyrics, the Turkish lyrics, you could say it is Greek, it is Cypriot, it is Mediterranean. I said 3 till now. And the fourth was the national anthem of Cyprus, the Lyrkotissa, and it was sung by a sexy, beautiful, when I say sexy, it is not sexual. It is beautiful girl. It was sung by a Turkish girl. I think it's Turkish, maybe it's a Turkish Cypriot living in Istanbul. Turkish girl with an old man like me. So this means I can have the right to meet the girl. And this was sung with this girl with an old man. And at the beginning was sung in Turkish language, and at the end it was sung in Greek language, in Greek dialect, Greek Cypriot dialect. And this song was the song of Mr. Akinji's campaign, yes. So Mr. Akinji needed a song to be elected Charis. So we have to stand up and speak to the hearts of people, and people do not need only logic. They need us to speak to their hearts and make them love again their country. And they love it. We have to make them express their hearts and make them to present correct leaders. So I beg all these people that they are present now, and we have enough Turkish Cypriots who I welcome and I thank them to be present, and I beg them to participate and put questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicos. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Anybody who wants to comment on the survey, let's not get away from our passion. Sorry?
There are a number of people who are raising their hands.
I can't see anyone. You can
well, it's Merobi Tsimili.
Give them the floor. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a very bad voice. I'll try to speak a little slowly.
This is Meropi.
We heard. Yes, this is Meropi without Meropi's voice. To start with, I want to state that I would have no problem with Bella Ciao, Nicos.
I know.
Yes. So let us go back to the main thing, the subject of this discussion. I was very pleased to attend again to Charis and Neophytos who presented this research, which we have had the opportunity to have at Cafe Neo Dispentis. And so I'm not going to make comments on that, but only that we have to understand that these people who have voted in the way that they have voted, they didn't vote because of the politicians. They voted despite the politicians. It is despite, and Soula has commented it, maybe not so aggressively as I put it, but indeed, whatever is coming and suppressing the people from the government and the media, which it controls, they are making the people feel ashamed even to put as first choice the federation, because it was commented before that for the Greek Cypriots, okay, I can only answer for the Greek Cypriots, I would say, they put as first choice the unitary, I don't know what is it, the term, state and then federation. And we are wondering why. Because they are suppressed day and night with what is said by the dominating mentality. And when Mr. Kasoulides said about the political equality and answered to Soula that he does not know what Anastasiadis is doing, we all know that he has thrown it into the trash. He has been throwing it since the Grand Montana, and he continues to keep it there. From time to time, he remembers that maybe it is a time to persuade the General Secretary of the United Nations, and then he pulls out of the trash what he had promised once. Watch, we should all be very, very critical. And when Nico says to address to the heart of the people, it is not the heart of the people. It is not an emotional thing. It is the way that they have been under brainwash all this time. What we should do is to exercise heavy pressure on the president if he can't understand anything anymore. Or with Niyazi, I fully agree with him. I agree with Andromachi. And about the compromise, actually I raised my hand to speak about the compromise, and Soula said it. Yes, we still, the dominating opinion or perception, even from the people who are ready to vote for it, it is a compromise, and not even a compromise just. They are calling it, many of them, painful, painful compromise. It is not the middle because it is the only possible solution. It is the only correct solution. I take it from Niyazi. He has said it many years ago. Not only that it is not a compromise, and not only, it is not just the only possible, it is the correct solution. And yes, it is not just not separation and not domination. It is what could give us an agreement. It is an agreement to build a solution. And with this solution, all the aspects that Andromachi said that they are covered by the question of the Cyprus problem, they would unfold. And there are so many things which are related. It is the internal situation, it is the scandals, it is the corruption, and I would go one step further, which was not touched today. It is the war which is escalating, or the fear of the war which is escalating around us. Because even the war in our understanding in the left wing. It is Anastasiadis who drove Mitsotakis to enter in these stupid things with the alien alliances he was doing, and all the discussions with Israel, the murderer of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Meropi. Thank you. And we appreciate the fact that you are not feeling very well, but you are still with us. Well, I would like to hear some Turkish Cypriots. Mrs. Cholak, would you like to comment on what we have said until now?
I'm trying to find the Cholak. Okay.
Yes. Okay, until you find her, Niyazi wants to say something. We can listen to Niyazi.
There is, I think I found Cholak.
Okay.
Can I be heard?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to hear what Niyazi has to say, so I'll be very brief. As I listen to all this with my observation of what's been happening in the past decades, I would say that our problem is not just the Cyprus problem and the contents and the different options about how we settle property, governance, territory. It seems to be a lot more fundamental, maybe to do with democracy and about how as our friend was saying, how we translate what the people are prepared to accept or now feel that they need into what the politicians implement for us on our behalf. We choose them, we elect them. But now, and for many decades, there seems to be a separation between what the people want and what a politician is prepared to achieve. On our side, and this is a little bit in response to Mr. Kasoulides, I kind of felt he was calling on the Turkish Cypriots to realize that, in fearing oppression from Greek Cypriots, they were being dominated by Turkey. But I don't think the Turkish Cypriots need to be made aware of that. They are aware of that. And I think the strongest and pretty much the only chance we had to show that we saw what was at stake and the danger that we were in was the Annan Plan. That was our only chance. And we used it, but we still didn't get to a solution that the majority of the people were able to demonstrate with their vote. Since then, we have not had an opportunity for my community, or for, I guess, the Greek Cypriot community either, to reflect this. So again, we have to talk about the Cyprus problem, but we also have to talk about how democracy and politics works or fails in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cholak. I have to say that you have served as a foreign minister as well in your side.
Soula,
Yes.
if you open the participants pane, that's one of the icons at the bottom of your page, then you will be able to see who is asking to speak.
I don't know. I see myself in the picture down the side. Anyway, Niyazi is going to talk now. Hello.
Trying to find Niyazi. Okay.
All right. Okay, hi, yes.
Yeah.
Just a few words. First of all, let me say that I tried, and I'm still trying, to historicize the federal state in Cyprus. And I will try to explain what I mean. To historicize the federal state in Cyprus is to say federalism did not happen to us as an accident. We, Greek and Turkish Cypriots, we ended up there after our all endures. We tried very hard for domination of the Cypriot majority, and we tried very hard for Turkish Cypriot separation. We fought all our wars, and we failed in both separation and domination. This is where history brought us to a point to say, now, federal state is our perspective, is not the bitter pill we have to have, is a perspective to come out of division, partition, and from all this anomaly. The question is very simple. How can we organize a state, a political organization, to run our affairs in this small geography without domination and without ethnic separation? That's what we are discussing about it. And if we are not aware, this ethnic antagonism from 50s will go on. Between lines, we're going to see tendencies searching for domination. Between tactical moves, we're going to see desires for separate Turkish Cypriot state. There are repetition of old antagonisms. And our citizens, we should understand, when we are voting for a political elites, we have to be very careful what we are doing. Are we reproducing the ethnic antagonism, or do you want to put a dot to that? That is the question, because I don't remember political elites who are coming and saying we don't want a solution. Everyone says, vote me, and I go for a solution. And of course, what solution may we do in mind, most of the time is repetition of certain things. So let's be very clear. There is no federal state without political equality of two communities, because this is the only way to exclude domination. There is no federal state if you insist that Turkish Republic will be remaining as a guarantor power with interference rights. Let's delete things which our history told us are not acceptable. If we delete things unacceptable in search to create a federal perspective, then we're going to come close. But to be honest, this is not an academic exercise. This is not a theory. Because the division of Cyprus and the status quo created interest groups, which they do identify their interest and invest their interest in the status quo of today. We may say status quo is not maintainable. Many UN resolutions are saying this. Many political leaders are saying this. But it is true that federalism is a cause which we have to fight for it. And we have to fight against nationalist elites, on the one hand, which were obsessed with their historical grand narratives of Greek Cypriot domination or Turkish Cypriot separation. But besides these nationalist elites, we have to also tackle the issue of interest groups which status quo produced, and these interest groups which they do identify their interest in a status quo. Those Greek Cypriots who they don't want to share with Turkish Cypriot power, for example. Those Turkish Cypriots who actually they have unjustly endorsed the Greek Cypriot property and they don't want to give nothing back, and many other social status. If we are aware, then we are aware what kind of political fight do we need to fight to end up in a federal state, which is the common good of both communities. Federal Cyprus state is the common good. The rest are particular interest. And we saw this in other federal states. No federal states came to be founded in the world or established without giving this political fight and struggle against particularist interests of different social groups. That is what's happened in the United States to come from confederalism to federalism. That's what's happened in Belgium or in Switzerland, not to mention others. So, do we want federalism? History tells us that the only way to achieve a common good for all Cypriots is a federal state. But there are many impediments and obstacles which are class-bounded, elite-bounded, not only ideological, but really social class-based. And we have to fight this together. Another thing, just my last word. You cannot struggle for federal Cyprus separately as ethnic communities. You cannot talk about peace and federal state in Turkish only or in Greek only. If the federalists, they don't join their forces, their power, their vision, and if they don't appear on a platform together to speak the political language of federalism, probably we will be doomed to failure, and probably our country will be divided forever. Because, as I said, federalism is not an accident, it's a historical option and perspective. But if we don't grasp it, and if we don't honor this with our wisdom, then it's not also mira, it's not also kader. Probably we may also fail and have for a while, for a long time, a divided country. So I want to concentrate on that last bit. Let us come together and do things together for the federal Cyprus as a compromise and as a common good for all Cypriots, all citizens of Cyprus.
Thank you, Niyazi. Very good.
We have Andromachi, Steve Comer, Neophytos Loizides, and Theratokos Zakou Markouli asking for the floor.
Yes, okay. So, where do I go to?
Andromachi.
Mrs. Yes?
Andromachi has asked.
Okay, Andromachi.
I think it would be better if we go first to the people who have not spoken yet, and I can speak after, like Mrs. Serrato.
Okay, Mrs. Serrato. Mrs. Serrato, let's hear Mrs. Serrato. Also an ex-foreign minister. Yes.
Can you?
No, I cannot hear her.
Serrato, can you unmute your microphone?
Okay.
Okay. First of all, this is not the first time that I was able to see this presentation, which is really very promising. Some of the results are really unexpected, especially the trend towards a support to a federal solution. This is, for me, it was a very positive outcome and positive surprise. So I agree with what was said, especially by Mr. Kasoulides, by Niyazi, and I want to welcome also Andromachi, because we need to reach out to the young people. And I'm really, really glad that in this today's presentation, we have Andromachi, we have a representative of the young people, because if we lose the young people, and I'm afraid that we are losing the young people, then things will be much more difficult to solve the Cyprus problem in the future. So involving the young people, and this is something the Secretary General of the UN has been talking for a very long time, involving women, and women have been absent from the negotiations. The women's perspective has been absent from the negotiations, it's not just the physical presence of women in the negotiating table. It's taking up women's concerns in the negotiations. And unfortunately, despite the fact that a technical committee was set up right at the beginning of the new round of negotiations in May of 2015, the results of the outcome of the technical committee's conclusions have remained unseen. I don't think that the leaders have seen this paper, and I am afraid that neither the negotiators have had a look at them. So involving young people, involving women is extremely important. One thing that I am really concerned is that despite, I mean, compared to the past, where we had many bicommunal groups, many bicommunal activities, not only between citizens, but let's say the chambers of commerce, the trade unions, they had very frequent meetings, and they had very important projects together, and very important messages coming from these groups and addressed to the citizens in both communities. So, of course, now during the period of the pandemic, this is not possible, but this was also before. This was, I would say, during the last 3 years, we have seen less and less such bicommunal activities. On federalism, I fully agree, I fully endorse what Niyazi had said, because I am a true federalist. I believe in federalism, and if you ask me, what do I prefer, a unitary state or a federal state for my country? I would prefer a federal state, taking into account the historical, the history of the island and the difficulties that we had since the beginning of our establishing our own state. So I am a strong believer in federalism, and I think that the leaders, not only the present leaders, but the leaders since the beginning of the negotiations back in the 70s, have totally failed, and they still fail to educate people, to make people aware of federalism, and especially what is going to change in their lives. This is what people are concerned. What is going to change in my life, in my daily life, in my family, in my work, in my health, in my social insurance, in all these. And I think that we have to dispel the fears by educating people about federalism and what it means, what is a new state of affairs that will emerge in a federal state. So we need to, and I think as Απόφαση, Ειρήνης, and other groups that have been supportive of the bizonal, bicommunal federation, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility. If the leaders are not doing it, let us do it. Let us find those experts, let us find the people who can communicate in a simple language these messages to the people and make them aware of, I wouldn't say the details of the governance and all these things that are not understandable by the people, but explain to them what is going to change in their life, and what is going to change is something very positive, and this is what the message should be. Another thing I want to mention is the language. We have a problem. We have had a problem for a very long time, and we have not been doing anything. to introduce the language, the respective language in our schools. We are a group here that we are speaking English, but we have hundreds of people, thousands of people in both communities that the English is not their language. So we need to speak the language of each other. This is what is happening in Belgium. This is what is happening in Canada, that they have federal systems. And this is what the leadership of these countries have put in place so that they will allow the communication between the people. And a final thing I want to say is about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We need to heal the wounds, because there are wounds in both communities. Nicos said earlier, I don't want to talk about the past, about the mistakes. The mistakes in the past are there, and the wounds are still open in both communities. So we need to find a way, and I would say, why wait until we have a solution and establish these Truth and Reconciliation Commissions? We can do that before, so that the process of healing will start. So with this, I hope that we can continue not only our discussions, but also take action. Merope said that we have to put pressure, and of course, this is what we have to do. In our pressure towards our leaders, pressure towards the system, because I agree with Niyazi that there are many interest groups and many people who are comfortable with the status quo. Unfortunately, they don't want to change because their seats, their political roles, and all that, they have been nurtured from the Cyprus problem. So
thank you, Mrs. Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. It's true that there are many issues now open, like the issue of conciliation, for example, again is in the hands of the government. I mean, private groups, the relatives of missing persons, of deceased persons and so on, killed persons, murdered persons and so on, they all have done so many events. They have met between them. They got to know the relatives of their friends on the other side, but this is a work of the government again, and the government is not willing to do anything. Even the issue of the women in the negotiations, again, the government is not willing to do it. As I am a member of the gender committee, and we have tried. They're just not interested. They don't want to hear. They don't know what to do with these committees, actually. Anyway, let's hear a Turkish Cypriot is possible. If we have Erol Kaymak is here, wants to say something. Erol?
Erol?
No?
Erol, can you unmute your...
Anybody else, Turkish Cypriot, want to hear, to listen to a Turkish Cypriot? Young, preferably. If not, we go to Andromachi then.
Steve Comer is asking for
okay.
Here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. The last speaker made 2 points that I think were contradictory. One was that governments haven't promoted a federal solution or said what it's like to people. And I think that's right, they haven't. But then she answered her own question by saying, why haven't they done it? And they haven't done it because they like the system as it is. They like the status quo. They like the limited power in a smaller portion of the island than what they would get if you had a bigger government in a federal system. And I think this is the crux of the problem. And that, you know, let's be blunt about it. There are people on the island in strong positions of power and wealth who have done very well out of division. on both sides of the Green Line. You know, that there are
That's
people
right.
who owned rough bits of Paphos that were worth nothing. And suddenly when the coastal areas in the north went, then this was worth a lot of money. Now, are they going to back a solution? No, of course they're not. But because their wealth and power comes from not backing it. And similarly with people in the north who've become wealthy out of partition. Now, you're not going to win those people over. But what this report says very clearly is that whilst federal solution may not be the first choice option for the majority, that doesn't matter because it's an option that the majority can live with. And somebody mentioned the Northern Ireland situation earlier. Now, I think there are a lot of similarities between Cyprus and Northern Ireland, but there's one clear difference in that Northern Ireland had 30 years of armed conflict before it got to the Good Friday Agreement. And amongst the people, there was a wish to not have that permanent armed conflict with all the, you know, with all the stress and the death and the economic devastation that brought. So that put an impetus behind it. But the key aspect that made the thing work, there were actually two. There was firstly the Britain as the, you could say, occupying power in the north of Ireland, said it had no strategic interest in staying there. So that cleared that one out the way. And the other thing is that the agreement made it possible for people to identify themselves as British or identify themselves as Irish or identify themselves as both. And that hadn't happened before. And I think there is a parallel here with Cyprus because it is possible for people to identify themselves as a Greek-speaking Cypriot or a Turkish-speaking Cypriot or an Armenian-speaking Cypriot. Or even in the case of some of us, an English, German, or Bulgarian-speaking Cypriot, because the island is much more diverse now than it was 40 years ago. And so I think that there is the possibility of making a move, but it needs bold politicians to lead it. But it also needs, as has been said, a grassroots campaign to push. And if you look at what's happened in Ukraine and look what's happening in Belarus now, it's the grassroots movement that will push the change through, and we've yet to develop that in Cyprus. Lastly, I want to say that Cyprus is in a fortunate position as an EU member, and it has a lot of friends and allies around the world. And one of the things that's been happening in recent weeks and months is an alienation of those friends. I have raised the issue in another forum about the crossing rights for EU and other foreign visitors to Cyprus, which have now gone back to before 2003, ostensibly with a COVID excuse, although that is nonsense because to cross the Green Line, you need COVID tests anyway. And I've tried to interest Cypriot MEPs in this because I feel this is a direct contravention of the Green Line regulations that were signed in 2004 when Cyprus joined. Not only have I had no engagement, I've not even had the courtesy of a reply to say thank you for your email. And if that's the way you treat people who are resident here, who are friends of this island and want to see it progress, then it's not surprising that young people and others give up when they feel like they're bashing their head against a brick wall. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, you raised a lot of issues here, a lot of points, very interesting ones. I agree with you that the grassroots movement is needed if we want to change things. I agree that there are interests by many people who will never accept a solution. Okay, but we have to force our government, we have to push towards our government to find a way for a solution. Otherwise, there will be no Cyprus left to exploit. I mean, as we go, as we continue like this, the status quo is getting worse and worse. And the checkpoints closed. We have no communication with our friends. There are many issues here. But okay, all these are points for thought. Thank you very much. Now let's listen to somebody else then.
We have Neophytos Loizides, Andromachi,
Yes.
Charis Psaltis.
Uh-huh.
Want to speak.
Okay, before we go to them to conclude the discussion, I think we'll go to Andromachi. If she wants to add something, or any Turkish Cypriot friend who wants to say something.
Yes, thank you, Soula. My final point is that this discussion on the issue of leaving aside the issue of compromise, I actually believe that it is an issue, it is a generational issue as well. After the 1974 events, it was easy for someone to refer to a compromise when it comes to accepting a BBF. Today, though, we are at that stage in which we need to create the vision for a federation, just like Niyazi said, because this is the only way forward. And we are at that crucial stage in which, sadly, and especially Mrs. Eradoshi referred to my age, people of my age do not recognize the North as something that they need to claim. They do not recognize the North as something that it is ours, and especially even younger people than myself. They do not see any interest in actually having anything to do with the North. It is excruciating for any of us who really understand the island as a whole to experience this all the time when speaking to people of my age and younger. They understand Cyprus as ending on the green line, and those people with a vision when it comes to the Cyprus problem, their vision is a vision of rejectionism. It is a vision of yet another long-standing battle for something that might not even be achievable. And it is this vision of the great big no's that is so easy to build, because it is very easy to build a vision around the idea of rejection and around the idea of a no, rather than construct something that is going to be a construction of something out of pain, out of wars, out of very painful memories from the past, and to construct something new that will lead us into a new and different era. And this is what we are lacking today. We are lacking a vision that will move us forward, lacking the creation of a culture in the new generations that will really amass themselves around the idea that the best and only future for the country is a federation. And this is what we need today. And this is why I actually agree a lot with what Steve said on the issue of identity, because a federation doesn't challenge the identity of anyone. On the contrary, a federation allows people who identify themselves as either Greek-speaking, Turkish-speaking, Armenians, or anything, or even the people who are half Filipino, half British, because the structure of society today in Cyprus is so different from what it had been in 1974. Yes. And we need to create that vision moving forward. The final part that I want to say is regarding what Steve said on the crossing points. The crossing points are not open, they are closed, and we need to be clear about this. They need to have a test every 3 days. Means that some people and the people taking the decisions do not understand this island as a whole. Just like we might be going around cities in the south of Cyprus that have more cases than others, and we are not in need of a test, it should be the same for the north of the island. Sadly, the situation as it has been developed after the COVID case, really, we have perpetuated an understanding of partition in our minds and in our everyday life. And the fact that nobody reacts to this should actually make all of us concerned, and all of us who are here concerned, because it means that we don't have that power on the ground of people that really cannot stand a day without either visiting the north, or who cannot stand the understanding of Cyprus being cut in two. And for all of us here, I'm sure that we feel this pain, and it really should concern us. And we should be clear that the crossing points are not open at this stage, even for the Greek Cypriots and for the Turkish Cypriots. But I agree a lot with what Steve said on the rights of Europeans. Thank you very much, Soula.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Anyway, let's have now Mr. Loizides and Mr. Psaltis to conclude our discussion.
Yeah, a couple of concluding statements. Thank you very much, everybody, for your comments. They were extremely useful and informative, also in terms of future studies that we can think of. I think one of the key issues that emerges as a consensus is the need to move away from the archaic process of negotiations of two leaders getting together and failing to negotiate a peace settlement to something more inclusive. Now, what this survey and other surveys do, it tell us that the public is supportive of the settlement, therefore having more public engagement, having more civil society engagement will not damage the peace process. In fact, it will serve it even further. So the question here is what model could be established, whether it will be some kind of a convention, whether it will be multi-party negotiations. There's a lot of successful precedents there. Someone mentioned Northern Ireland, the Niyazi mentioned the Switzerland. There are a lot of different models there of having more participatory type of negotiations that will include women, that would include refugees, that would include younger people, make it as democratic as possible, as Emine suggested. The second question is about endorsements. In this study, we haven't included endorsements. It's possible that when we present the different packages, as Mr. Kasoulides mentioned, we also say that this is endorsed by your political party, this is endorsed by your leader. It's possible to do it. It would look probably, it would take a little bit of effort and imagination to include it in the survey. But here, what is important is that we got these results even without endorsements. It's possible that these results will even look better or stay the same when leaders, respected leaders, political leaders of both communities stand behind the settlement. Even better if international respected leaders endorse them at the same time. What is also important, though, as citizens, is being able to judge the settlement ourselves. It's very important as individuals, as our citizen responsibility, as citizens of the Republic of Cyprus and members of the two communities, to be able to make our independent judgment. And this is very important because the literature tells us that while we might be supporting a settlement favorably, if our leaders stand behind it, there is also the reverse effect. That if leaders of the other community that we don't like endorse the same settlement, that backfires. Now, the scenario here is that you have a peace settlement, and then Erdogan starts talking about how good the settlement is about Turkey, starts referring to it with common terms of Kazan that are being demonized all the time on the Greek TV, and then Greek Cypriot support automatically decreases. So it's very important for our citizens to be able to make their own judgment. That's just before, for their own reasons, members of the Turkish government decide that the peace settlement favors them, or the compromise, or whatever you like to call it, serves their own national interest. It doesn't mean necessarily that it doesn't serve us. And we have to be able to make this independent judgment without, of course, saying here that we shouldn't be trusting our political parties. We shouldn't be trusting our leaders. I think especially the value of political parties in Cyprus is extremely important as the endorsers of a future settlement. People will be going through a massive transition in the event of a peace settlement. So it's very important that they know that their political leaders stand behind these settlements. So personally, I don't see in the next few months any politician. There's a question in Northern Ireland of major political leaders emerging to support and lead the peace agreement. Perhaps Anastasiadis had this potential in the early months, in the early years of his first tenure. He obviously lost that prospect. He is now in this very end of his second tenure. We know from the study of referendums that leaders.
He has 3 more years, actually. It's not there towards the end of his term.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, he's not going through I mean, by the time we have a peace settlement, by the time we sit down, it will be looking like he's going, right? So it's not like I'm a leader and I'm here to stay for the next 10 years. So we know from referendums that if a leader runs a referendum at the beginning of his or her tenure, he or she is more likely to win it. While if it's at the end of it, there's a statistical correlation there. If it's at the end, the same leader does not have the same clout. So the model of a political settlement will be one that has to be broadly supported than led by a single leader. It has to be a multi-party, multi-actor negotiation beyond the conventional two-leader model that we've been used to in Cyprus so far.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Loizides. Mr. Psaltis?
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to comment on some of the comments made by some of our participants here in the chat window. Ilcin Artincik said that a large number of Turkish Cypriot youth leaving the north for a better life abroad. How long does Cyprus have until demographic in the north reaches critical condition? I guess that's a voice coming from a Turkish Cypriot youth who sees some kind of threat from the changes taking place. So I guess that might support the view that was expressed by Mr. Kasoulides earlier. I also see Ioannis Kasoulides, who is also a student at the University of Cyprus, later on, who states that from the results presented, one fact that has caught my eye is the increase in the Turkish Cypriot community accepting the status quo. As a young researcher, I have come across hopelessness among young individuals on a BBF or any kind of solution. They believe a solution will not come anytime soon, therefore accept the status quo because change will not happen. I wanted to comment on that, Aisha, because I think you are right. We noticed from research that a lot of times the Turkish Cypriot community observes what the leader in the Greek Cypriot community is promoting, and then somehow the climate also changes accordingly. So I think that the effect that these rumors that we've been having in the south, that Anastasiadis was discussing a two-state solution with Çavuşoğlu, might actually make some people think that we're not getting to a bizonal federation, or maybe we are going towards a two-state solution. So that might have disoriented people from being committed towards a federation. That might be an explanation. But on the other hand, we had a question from Erato whether there are any findings about the elections in the north. And although in the last 6 months in the research that we presented just now, we had a question about the elections in the north, and the Akinci with Tatar were quite close. We have just completed a new bi-communal research with Neophytos Hussein Chakal and Oded Leshem from Israel. And we are now seeing that the people in the north are voting for Mustafa Akinci to a much bigger extent. So it seems like in both the first round and the second round, Akinci now holds quite a wide margin in favor of his candidacy. So now things look more optimistic for Akinci than they used to look 6 months ago. I just wanted to close with a comment from Erol Kaymak. He noted that there needs to be a more inclusive process in the negotiations. That was also reiterated by Neophytos. We totally agree. We actually wrote a paper about the lack of inclusiveness in negotiations of internally displaced people that was published last year in an international journal. And it's not just the IDPs that are marginalized. It's people who have a real stake the solution of the Cyprus issue, but they're actually not involved in any way in the negotiations. It's the youth, it's women, it's all these kind of groups that have been earlier discussed. And I think that's really one of the, if we are going to make any progress anytime soon, we really need to focus our attention on how best to find a way to involve people from all these various groups in the negotiation of the Cyprus issue. So this is all I wanted to say. I see there are more comments, but maybe maybe the Soula wants to, or no, Themos want to take this up. Thank you very much.
I can't see these comments actually. I don't know. I'm not very good in technology. So if there's any
okay, Soula, if you scroll on your screen, you will see then a banner appears that says participants, chat.
Participants.
Can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so if you press chat, then you will be able to see them on your right-hand side.
I don't see. I used to see chat, but not now.
It's next to participants.
Chat. Yes. Okay. Well, there are many comments from Turkish Cypriots actually about the results about the coming elections. Okay, my feelings is that I feel very sorry that I cannot do anything about these elections. We cannot even go to the other side and make a demonstration or hold an event or something to express our feelings for a solution. For we want somebody to be elected who can find a solution, who can reach a solution. It's our state, and I believe in the North as well, has reached that stage that it can no longer go on. I mean, the corruption is so much. Everything is in ruins, I would say. I mean, education has so many problems. The legal system, everywhere you turn around to see, everything is in ruins. So Cyprus has to restart, to make a new beginning. And this, having a solution, and the federal state will help us to put something with new, in a new order, and create a new state with different dimensions up to date. This is my belief. Anybody else wants to comment, or shall we conclude our discussion? If anything else, if anybody else hasn't got anything to say. Well, I would like to thank you all.
Nicos Mesaritis raised his hand.
Nico.
On behalf of peace decision, George Mesaritis says peace decision is more correct. Themos says decision peace. Who cares? I would like to thank all. We were all the time between 45 and 50 participants. I would like to, from you all, to allow me to thank most of all our Turkish Cypriots, to express my best feelings for my Turkish Cypriots friends, or brothers and sisters, or sisters and brothers. And I would like to say that it would be better from now on to organize in English our events and have these common discussions. And if Mr. Akinji or my brother, not Niyazi agrees, we can organize a cycle of discussions about Federal Forum under the name of our late friend Nicos Mesaritis, who was the lighthouse for federal giving federal presentations in all over Cyprus, and now we don't have him. And instead of having citizens do not understand what federalism is, as Loizides Neophytos said before at the beginning, and then Niyazi said, we educate step by step Cypriots about federalism. So, thanking you all. Ευχαριστώ, and the security, if it is correct.
Okay.
Good night, Andromachi μου.
Well, I would say that now is the time for reunification or partition. It will all depend on who will be elected in the Turkish Cypriot elections, and on the determination of our side, not only to start negotiations, but to conclude negotiations, because we have started talking many, many times, but we never finished. The findings of the survey are very important, very promising, and for the first time, we feel very confident. Those that really care for the future of Cyprus should try their best to reach a federal solution. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. I hope you will forgive us about the problems we had with the technology. It seems that tonight Zoom had some sort of changes in the way it worked. We hope that we shall get used to it and be better next time. Thank you very much.
Right.
Ενός μας με τον Νιαζί, ρε Θεέ μου.
Ορίστε.
Ενός μας με τον Νιαζί.
You want Niyazi? Just a minute. I shall open all the microphones. Rather, I shall give you the right to open the microphones now. Let me see. Okay, you can unmute yourselves as you wish.
Ρε Φεντεράλ. Your last intervention was excellent and sexy.